Renee, going to go to the tennis? You ever go out to the tennis?
I've never been to the tennis.
You would
I'm going to do
enjoy
that
it.
tennis. I actually played tennis, though, Greeny.
Do you play tennis?
I used to in high school.
Were you good?
I was a bum salad. Keeping it real.
He was good at football, though, and that's what we're going to talk about here. The NFL season kicks off in 9 days, and just in time, we finally have a new contract for Cowboys receiver CeeDee Lamb. What took so long? He ended his holdout yesterday, finally agreeing to a 4-year, $136 million deal. Makes him the second highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. It includes a $38 million signing bonus, which is the largest ever given to a wide receiver, and $100 million of the dollars are guaranteed. So all worked out very well for him, and frankly, you just can't overstate how important he has been in Dallas since he got there. He's increased his catches, his yards, and his touchdowns in each season since he was drafted in 2020. And from that time, the QBR of the quarterback, Dak Prescott, is 93 when targeting Lamb. That's the highest of all the quarterback receiver combinations in the entire NFL during that stretch of time. So I'm going to change up the way we covered this earlier this morning. And look, I mean, the bottom line of it is this. They've got CeeDee in place. Micah Parsons is not getting a new deal, and it's very unlikely Dak Prescott is. They talked about being all in. They sort of changed the definition of what they meant by that, and they haven't really added much this offseason. They've mostly subtracted. So, Domonique, if I ask you right now, if you were to make a short list of teams that you could see in the Super Bowl from the NFC, are the Cowboys on it?
No, I mean, I think if the list is short, let's say it stops around 5, I think the Cowboys fall just outside of that list right now. As good as Dak Prescott was last year, and he could have reasonably been the MVP. They did lose Tyron Smith, and their center, Guyton, is gone. I do think, or no, their center, Biotish, is gone. They're replacing him with Guyton. I think that's going to be an issue. The real question is, how great can that defense be? The offense, I don't think, is going to be as good as it was last year. If the defense under Mike Zimmer can get up to dominant, best in the league type level, then maybe I give them a chance. But I think they're just outside of that top 4, top 5.
See, I'm just seeing that number at the bottom of your screen for the first time now, and I find it fascinating. Our analytics, our Football Power Index, considers the Cowboys the 3rd best team in the NFC, or at least that they have the 3rd best chance in the NFC of reaching the Super Bowl behind the 49ers. If I were to say to you that I personally, if I were just sitting here, and of course, the football season is always the most unpredictable of all the seasons because of injury, but if I were to say, right off the top of my head, San Francisco, the Rams, Green Bay, Detroit, and the Eagles, I think are all better than them. And I could make an argument, I think Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and Seattle might be as well. So, but to me, when you see that the FPI has them as the 3rd best team in the NFC, that surprise you? Too high for you?
Yeah, I have them like 5th. Right, but listen, you know, the best team doesn't always make it to the championship game.
Understood.
It's about, and listen, maybe they play better with low expectations. The fact that we talk about always needing somebody to hate. This is still a talented football team. That's why they didn't really have to add much. You know, I think what they did is they added what they needed. And, you know, when we talk about one of the biggest flaws, we talk about the running back position, but we all know there's going to be some good football players that get cut. Maybe they bring in a Boston Scott. Maybe they bring in, you know, a Dalvin Cook. Or maybe they make a trade for somebody. Like we said the same thing about Atlanta, and they were able to kind of shore up some of their deficiencies in this second wave of free agency we're about to have. But I think, listen, they have a good enough chance if they played it well together and, you know, get more out of less, right? Because I feel like this has been a team that we feel has always underachieved. Can the coaching staff get them to overachieve?
Okay, look, if they can do that, great. Thus far, they've never done it before.
Right.
Someone's going to need to explain some things to me. If they go out and sign all the players you're talking about, we'll revisit the conversation. But Jeff Darlington, right off the top of my head, someone tell me how a Green Bay team that walked into their building in the playoffs last year and beat the doors off of them and figures in every way to be better this year because their quarterback has more experience, their receivers have more experience. They had a good draft and they've added pieces while the Cowboys have basically done nothing but lose pieces. Someone tell me how Green Bay falls below them in that pecking order among other teams. I don't understand this ranking.
Yeah, but at the same time, to me, it doesn't matter what they do until the postseason. So I'm not really necessarily worried about, I mean, as long as they get into the playoffs, which, by the way, you mentioned the Eagles as a team you believe are better than them. Think about the mystery surrounding the Eagles. Like, I don't know that I'm willing to say that I have full assurance that the Eagles are going to be a better team, which puts the Cowboys in pole position to perhaps win their division and get in that way. So To me, nothing matters about the Cowboys until the postseason anyway. We can talk about Dak Prescott being a midseason MVP. We can say Mike McCarthy is earning it to be the future coach of this team. Not until they prove capable of winning that postseason game, which they failed terribly to do so this past year, do we really have a conversation about what the Cowboys are.
Well, that's the point. Domonique, the odds are not telling us they're the third best regular season team. They're telling us they're the third best chance to make it to the Super Bowl. They haven't made it to the conference championship game since I was in high school, and I'm getting to be a pretty old man out here. So I am personally very surprised by those numbers. Final word, Domonique.
Yeah, I like you, am surprised with those numbers. But the way that it is possible is all those great players that they drafted that we've talked about, they have to have career years. Like Deron Bland was a player whose name that very few people knew last year. He got six pick sixes.
But they had a hole, and the hole was they thought that they can win in a nickel package, and they got bully balled and realized that they can't win that way. They shored that up. They brought in Eric Kendricks, and they brought in Carl Lawson so that Michael Parsons can move to the inside. They also shifted to a 4-3, and they brought in Zimmer, who brings in toughness and has a resume that's as good as any defensive coordinator in the history of this game. It's about mental toughness. It's about getting more out of less.
Yeah,
and I think they can do that.
I'd love them to be right.
It's a mentality.
Don't get me wrong. You know me. Anyone make fun of me. I talk about them all the time here because talking about them, people are generally interested in. I would love to be wrong, but right now I find that number very confusing. In the meantime, holy smoke, Jerry Jones. So Jerry Jones gives an interview to DLLS. And he was asked about being the general manager and remaining the Cowboys' decision maker. And he has heard people say forever that that's the problem. This is his response, and I can only read you the words in it that I can read you. He said, "I've done it all. So I have an inordinate amount of confidence that blank, if anyone can figure out how to get this stuff done, I can figure out how to get it done. I've been there every which way from Sunday, and I've busted my behind a bunch. And there's nobody living that's out cutting and shooting that can't give you a bunch of times they busted their behind. So hell no, there's nobody that could bleep and come in here and do all the contracts and be a GM any better than I can. Plus, I'm where the buck stops. When it bleeps up, I've got to cover it. So there, you can't give anybody enough. Can't give. There's nobody can do it." Holy smoke. What is he talking about?
They should have kept the camera on you, man, because your hand gestures was amazing.
I mean, I'm trying to read that with as much energy as it feels like it deserves, and I'm trying to figure out how to talk my way around the words I can't say on television. Domonique, what are we reading here? What's he saying?
I don't even know what cutting and shooting is, but I don't know. I'm glad that no one is out there cutting and shooting as much as Jerry Jones. I mean, it does seem a little like sad. It's not something you expect an owner to be out here yelling about and emotional, but I would have an emotional response if someone told me that I was a bad general manager, considering how well this team has drafted and developed over the last several years. Like, he's one of the few teams that's been able to transition from a good quarterback to another good quarterback and find all pros deep in the draft and all over the draft. So, like, yeah, I get why his response has been a little emotional. Taking the next step, that's the problem. I think you could argue that he hasn't done a good job in hiring and firing coaches, but you can't knock him for talent acquisition and development.
That part of it I get, and I believe that is one of the reasons that he would have a right to be aggravated. The fact that he keeps sticking by his coaches, Jeff, surprises me, particularly from the standpoint that they have underachieved. They have played lesser than, in the playoffs, than their talent. He has done a great job at the top of the personnel department of putting good players on the field. I don't think that's debatable, Jeff.
No, I think it's all very complicated because you look at the draft picks. You look at the fact that I know we've called him, quote unquote, cheap the past several months with these negotiations. He does wind up paying CeeDee Lamb, even though he acts like he's not going to all along. To your point, the question becomes the coaching, the little things that ultimately lead to a championship. Are you willing to make those hard decisions? And I think sometimes the conflict in your mind of being the owner and the general manager can really create a problem when it comes to these big decisions. So I get where you're coming from with this. I think it's actually a really good point.
What do you think here, Bart?
I mean, this was Jerry Jones' victory lap, right? People were saying for months and months that CeeDee Lamb wasn't going to get done. He's telling you, listen, we don't need CeeDee Lamb right now. This was his Franklin from Snowfall, type of moment. I built this, me, brick by brick, right? And he's talking about, listen, all the success that he's had. He's built the reason why he has these issues is because he's drafted well, right? Because he brought in good coaches. How do you fire a coach that finishes 12-5 and 12-5? That's hard to do. That's nuance right there, right? What he hasn't done and where he's failed is he's almost made it too comfortable to be a Dallas Cowboy. You don't really earn that stripe on the side of your helmet. It comes with a lot of benefits of being a Dallas Cowboy, and I think he has to do is change the culture around there and change it from being a culture of a good team to being a championship caliber team, and that means making it uncomfortable for those players within that building and keeping guys on edge. And for him, he can't friend everybody up. He has to hold them accountable.
Jeff?
The only funny thing I find about this quote, honestly, is that he said it right before he signed CeeDee Lamb to essentially a record-breaking deal when it came to guaranteed money. Like, talk about a tough negotiation. They were between the Cowboys wanted a 5-year deal. CeeDee wanted a 3-year deal. They ended up on a 4-year deal. How hard was that? I don't understand this, like, thump my chest right now because I just paid this guy all this money on a negotiation that was pretty easy to do.
Yeah, that's the owner part. The owner part of it, of the football, I think he's done much less well than the GM part. I just went back to their drafts. I mean, 2014, they drafted Zach Martin and DeMarcus Lawrence, Ezekiel Elliott, Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, Connor Williams, Tony Pollard on the 4th round, CeeDee Lamb, Trayvon Diggs in one draft, Micah Parsons, who they traded back to take. This team has drafted very well, Domonique. I don't think that you can question their talent acquisition.
Yeah, you certainly can't question that, but I do think that we keep harping on the same issues. It's that Jerry Jones seems to want to be in the front, and he seems to want to hire people that don't get him what he needs. I'm not sure exactly how to get over the hump. If I were, maybe I'd be doing that job. But we all knew that Mike McCarthy was not an advancement in coaching acumen. As good as this team has been, they kind of reached where they expected to reach. He didn't get them to the next level. The same thing with Jason Garrett and the previous regime is that they were always pretty good, and we always said the Cowboys had a chance, but they couldn't get over that hump, and it's hard not to lay that at the feet of the owner because he's the only thing that remains constant.
Jake
if we're going to give him the credit
on the
for
4th
drafting,
round,
we have to also give him criticism.
On the 5th round, remarkable stuff. All right.